Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Voltron discussion topic video. This one is going to be basically some other Season 3 discussion, kind of just speculating basically about a lot of the plot points that are still open after Season 3, going into some of the big theories and kind of discussion points from Season 3, speculating going into Season 4, and also just in general, I suppose, just talking about some of the plot points still left over from like the first two seasons that haven't really been addressed yet. Just a kind of general video discussing a lot of that stuff. So, it's going to be a bit all over the place video, but I think there's a lot of interesting things to discuss. And I think just in and itself, it's an interesting thing that I think this is the first season that has really got me like interested enough in terms of discussions to actually want to do like a speculation video going into the next season. After season 1, I don't think they'd presented enough. Even after season 2, I think there wasn't enough information to really go in depth into a lot of speculation things. Now I feel just there is actually a lot of stuff, and there's information there that we can speculate on, and it's going to be fascinating to see if the fandom gets it right or not. But let's start off with some of the plot points that season 3 didn't really touch upon, and if I think season 4 or how to approach doing them full stop going forward. So the first one is Keith being Galra, or part Galra. This was one of the bigger reveals in season 2, but I think a lot of people are very critical of how season 2 approached doing the reveal, in that it basically happened off camera. We didn't really see any of the characters' reaction to it. Even Keith, didn't really seem to have that big of a reaction to what happened. And that, combined with the fact that they very much played their get out of jail free card with regards to revealing Keith's backstory, it just feels like this kind of just plot thread that's like, it's there and we'll get to it eventually. And I wasn't a fan of how they just kind of walked away from potentially getting into his history with his father and mother, more importantly. The only real thing that season 3 did with this was that I think they sort of alluded to the fact that Keith was kind of annoyed with what some of the other leaders of planets were saying, and how they were treating the Blades of Marmora, and how I suppose he thinks he may be treated if he's really open about the fact that he's part Galra. They didn't really lean into it all that much, but I think it was there to a degree. And then obviously what they did later on was they confirmed, that, okay, the character that Keith kind of saved / met in the belly of the Weblum was in fact Aksha, one of Lotor's kind of team members, pretty much his second in command, it seems like. And there's obviously speculation about who is this character, what's her connection to Keith beyond just the fact that they met each other before. Is she related to Keith? I think the obvious thing that people go for is we're kind of speculating about his mother. Is this his mother? It's really hard to judge a lot of characters' ages in Voltron. We've just recently gotten early kind of people who've gotten the Voltron fact book early have just basically given us the ages of most of our main characters. But Aksha, how old is she? I think she looks a little bit more mature than some of our characters. But I wouldn't put her as being I think old enough to have an 18-year-old child, which is Keith's age. I don't think she looks that old. So to me, it almost comes across as older sister, perhaps, who just has a more Galra side to her. But still, if that is the case, it begs the question, of course, what's her origin story and what are they going to do with the connection going forward? Because another thing with this season that was kind of weird was the Blades of Marmora. They were there for the first episode or two, touched upon, then they disappeared again, which is more or less what they did with them for the most of season 2. They were there when they kind of needed to be, but they never went in depth enough to really get to know them all that much. And that Antok's death at the end of season 2, just not really mentioned at all here. It's just, here's Colavan and some of the other Blades, that's it. In that, I felt like they were setting up something with the fact that the Blades were doing a lot of the work to free these planets, but were just basically getting the same treatment that the Galran Empire military we're getting, and just the need to, I think, for a lot of the good guy characters to really make it clear that the Blades are on the good guy side. I think what they do need to do with the Blades is to clarify if they represent normal Galran society or if they represent a different, like, or they're just a different faction who have a different view to say how things were in the flashback before all this stuff went down. Like, does Zarkon have any connection to the Blades prior to his big turn and in terms of making the Empire? That's what I think they need to get into, because I think that fact book confirmed that, like, Keith is like an official member of the Blades of Marmora now. Not that that really came across this season or anything like that. They were gone. So I think that's a consistently kind of weird thing, that, like, where are they now going to get to the point where they reveal Keith's backstory? When is going to be the valid point to do that? Because they've kind of walked themselves into a little bit of a corner in that the explanation they gave for why he couldn't hear that story then is because basically the whole idea of, like, you have your family now, you're with the people who you need to be with in Team Voltron. You pursuing the past, which is not what you're with right now, is just something that you don't need to do. So how are they now going to turn around and say, oh, this is the right time for you to learn that? You can now learn this, but also have your own family. It's just a weird writing thing of, like, they presented this reason for why you can't do it then, but you can do it now. So I hope they do the writing of that quite well, because there's a lot going on with Keith in that he is the leader of Voltron, and now he's going to have to deal with the fact that Shiro is kind of there as the kind of tactical leader, and, you know, a lot of that stuff going on. The second thing that they didn't really address this season was basically Hagar versus Allura from season 2, the fight at the end, and basically the fact that Allura seemed to be revealed to basically be immune to dark magic, and basically they seem to establish that Allura either herself has the potential to use magic herself, or can redirect dark magic and make it into good magic. I'm not really sure what the reveal that we're meant to take away is. I looked on the wiki about this, and they seem to be interpreting that scene as that was the awakening of, like, magic powers within Allura, and they kind of pointed out a few other points where Allura seemed to show off kind of somewhat magical abilities. You know, obviously that combined with the fact that she's what she's able to do with the Balmeras and so on, speaks to the fact that she has some connection with, like, quintessence and energy, and that with the reveal of, like, I suppose Hagar, and why Hagar is, like, the only character to have this dark magic is a very interesting one, because it kind of almost seems to establish that Hagar's dark magic is literally this dark creature, like, energy, dark life form, that is basically inhabiting Hagar's body, and when she uses dark magic, it is effectively this dark energy that she's literally firing at Allura. And so are they basically saying that Allura can't be affected at all by this dark creature entity from this alter reality that they got it from? So if that is the case, that's probably one of the bigger plot points in the series right now, that it would seem that that is a huge immunity for Allura to have, that she can't actually be influenced or anything like that by this dark creature. Which I'll get into discussing the dark creature, because it is one of the more important reveals of the kind of the big flashback episode. But I do wonder how they're going to approach, I suppose, Allura's power going forward, and that they've already established that she's really developing as a pilot of the line, she's really developing as a fighter just on the ground. Are they now also going to add this extra power onto Allura of her having the ability to use magic as well? I'm not sure in terms of, like, how she's going to learn how to use this technique, or how they're really going to get to the point where they establish the importance of Allura having this kind of immunity to dark magic. But it was definitely a notable thing in that Hagar was completely shocked when her magic just didn't do anything to Allura, and that, like, basically a shield came up for Allura the second she was hit by the stuff. So I think that is a pretty, notable reveal. The last thing really on this side of things, unaddressed plot points, would be Earth itself. This season really didn't talk at all about Earth. And it's not a huge criticism I'd have of the series, but I definitely think they've sort of forgotten a little bit about Earth. End of season 2, they did reference it, like, oh, maybe we'll return after all this issue is done. But I feel like what they need to do at some stage is kind of introduce Earth into the conflict, because part of the establishment of this series is that the Kerberos mission was basically for humanity to actually find if there's other life in the galaxy. And so Shiro's mission with Paige's brother and so on was to see if there was other life out there. Now, technically, with the whole Team Voltron and all these other species that we've met, by going to other planets, it is confirmed that there is other life out there. The problem is that we immediately move things away from Earth, and so we're not really clear on if Earth actually knows about these other things. And I think it would be a really interesting dynamic if Earth was suddenly brought into the conflict. That, like, instead of going to like some random planet dealing with like the planet Puig, which we dealt with in season 3, and the Puigians, what if we suddenly had Earth be a big plot point, and that like Lotor attacks Earth, and then the Paladins have the emotional impact of having to defend their home planet, but also being close enough, obviously, to then maybe communicate with their family, and have basically humanity really discovered the fact that they're not the only ones out there in the galaxy, and that be a huge thing. And how like the Earth military, or the whatever it's called, the Star Space Force, again, like this is a thing, we're so far removed from that first episode where they established the whole idea of the kind of pilot academy that like Shiro was a part of, that Keith and Lance were a part of. I can't even remember what it's called now. The Galaxy Force, whatever it was called, the kind of defense force that they were in. They need to, I think, bring that sort of stuff back into the show to some degree. What else? So I suppose we'll move into some of the other things. I think the biggest thing that people are speculating about, that is the big talking point coming out of this season, is the Shiro that we have right now, back reunited with the team. Something's up with him, and depending on what your theory is, depending on how you interpret things, it's going to be very different, basically, what you say the problem is. Some people, the main one seems to be either that like it's a clone or a robot, with the idea being that this is Shiro, but it is a kind of fake version of him, whether that be an actual organic clone or a robot with like kind of human kind of skin type thing over it. Or that it is actually the real Shiro, but he's been, I suppose, compromised in some way, and he is allowing the enemies to spy on Team Voltron, or they can like activate something within him at some point, that he's basically like some sort of a sleeper agent that they have within the team. It's interesting because obviously episode 5 is the key episode for this, in terms of where all of the discussion stems from. How you interpret that episode, the episode where we see his full journey, because a lot of it, if you really analyze it, is just like, this is all very convenient in a way. There's a lot of weird things that happen, like the two people he meets, like it's really specific that like they arrive to save Shiro at this point in time. They have a specific thing that stops his arm from changing form, and as they're talking, like a signal for Voltron just happens to come in at that point in time. He just happens to avoid being shot down. All this stuff just like convenient, the way like, oh, the fighter pilots were called off just as Voltron went to escape, and so on. The only thing I think that's in any way a kind of like, can we perhaps in any way like stop a little bit of the conspiracy theories about like it's a fake Shiro, is just that the reason Shiro is found by Team Voltron in that episode is because the Black Lion senses Shiro. And I think the show has made it very clear that if there's one thing you can trust, it is the judgment of the lions. So the Black Lion sensing Shiro, to me, tells me that, at least to a degree, that has to be the real Shiro. Now, of course, you can always bring in the whole idea of like, but if this is a clone thing, maybe the Galrans have made a clone so good that the lion can't even sense if it's the real Shiro or not, and that sort of thing. So it's all about like, do you really place everything on the fact that the lion was the reason Shiro was found, or do you place a lot on how good the technology of this kind of clone, or what they've done to Shiro actually is? Um, if not, it definitely speaks to like, where is Shiro, and that they also avoided really fully answering the question of like why he disappeared from the battle at the end of season 2. In that they talked about, okay, the Black Line has a teleport power, maybe Zarkon activated this, but what actually happened with Shiro there? Is it something about the arm? I think the arm might come back and like they'll reveal something even more special about the arm, the Galran arm that he has, that maybe they literally can like call him back and teleport him back using that arm. I'm not entirely sure. I personally myself place a lot on the fact that the Lion was the one who found Shiro, and more or less would kind of be like, okay, the theory that right now I'm leaning towards is that this is the real Shiro, but that there is something kind of like implanted within him, that like he's basically a spy. They're spying on Team Voltron through him, or have done something to his mind where they can like take him over, or he has these subtle orders to influence the team to kind of tear them apart. In that you could definitely like to some degree maybe interpret like Shiro stepping over Keith in terms of the leadership stuff and like the final battle of this season as maybe him trying to mess up the team's kind of coordination, or is that just honestly Shiro kind of and Keith struggling for like what way the leadership should be? I can definitely see a lot behind the the clone theories or the robot theories, because of how they showcased a lot of the stuff in the Journey episode, in that they zoom in on his eyes and they talk about it being like subject something responds to like stimuli, and they kind of have these effects like it is maybe his eye is like an actual mechanical thing now, but it could easily be something like, no, that's just the machine that's checking his eye that's making that noise rather than his eye itself. There's definitely some weird stuff in like the timeline around it's kind of weird in that like unless they establish that like they've been searching for Shiro for months, it's only been like maybe a week or something like that between him going missing and them finding him. So why is his hair so long? That sort of stuff. There's definitely some weirdness, and like a lot of people put like just those two characters again that end up helping Shiro, of just like we oddly cut back to them towards the end of the episode and they're just like eating these noodle things, and it's just like, are we meant to like look into that at all? Like they talks about how like I volunteered for just be on this planet for 5 years and that sort of thing. It's odd, but is it something more? I have a feeling there will be some sort of a thing where perhaps they do come back to this episode and talk about how it was this testing ground for like Shiro clones or Shiro robots, and it is an effort to get someone back into the fold. Either way, I suppose my one worry would be that if it is the reveal of the clone or a robot, that they then kind of suddenly place this like, oh, so we can't trust the lions like implicitly anymore. Not that the Black Lion was trying to like mislead anyone, but that like they're not kind of as infallible as we've kind of been led to believe with regards to their judgment. But I'm not entirely sure on that as well, because they could also go down the road of like revealing that like the black paladin, Shiro, has always been a clone. Like the worthy one to be the paladin for the first 2 seasons was a clone of Shiro, and that we've never actually, maybe outside of the first scene with the Kerberos mission, we've never actually like met and had like, a lot of scenes with the original Shiro, and that it's always been a clone. It's always been this person, and there's always been a sense of like the Galra have like influenced him in some way. But it's hard to really say right now. I think it's definitely one of the more interesting topics to speculate on, And I really love reading everyone's new theories as they analyze those scenes and so on. I think it's definitely one of the unique things about the new format that we have, of just it being basically half a season, and knowing that like we're only like 8 weeks away from the next batch of episodes, and potentially getting more information on this, more speculation on this, that in a couple of weeks those theories could be proven wrong completely or proven right completely, and I think that's really, really interesting. I suppose one of my final topics I want to talk about, we'll see where we go, is based on the last episode, The Legend Begins, the big flashback. What is the Dark Creatures, as they refer it to? This is definitely one of the most interesting reveals of this season, in that they basically established that, this is the cause of a lot of what's happened in the universe right now, in that this, changing into a different alternate reality here, there is a separate reality where basically it seems like that reality is just quintessence and then this dark energy creature thing. And that's all it is. I think they need to kind of make a clarification on that at some point, because they were very careful to specifically say, like, they're not portals to different dimensions, they're just alternate realities. Yet the one where like Zarkon and Unnerva basically get possessed by the dark energy thing, there's not like planets there. It's not like it is a different interpretation of the world. It's just all there is quintessence and then the dark creature stuff. So that's maybe just a unique world, or else it is some sort of a world where all that's left of it, it's either maybe the beginning or end of like that universe, where all that's left in it is literally energy and darkness. They could definitely go down that road. But they established that this dark energy thing is effectively the biggest threat, in that this is what Voltron was made to combat initially. They made Voltron to basically nullify this dark energy, and that's what it was able to do. And then since then, Zarkon went after Voltron to obviously use Voltron to get into this dimension again, to get the quintessence needed for him and Unnerva Hagar to survive all the time that they have. But it also establishes that basically the reason Hagar and Zarkon are evil now is effectively because of this thing, that Zarkon has been basically possessed by this dark energy source the entire time, and that Hagar having this dark energy, and I suppose her influence on the Galra Empire with the perhaps overuse of technology, the use of magic, and all this sort of stuff that she uses, why the Galra Empire searches for quintessence so much is because basically this dark energy source has primarily inhabited Unnerva Hagar, in that, as I said earlier on, she seems to be established to be like the only character right now we've been presented with who can use magic in the entire show, apart from maybe Allura, depending on what they're doing with her. But that it's meant to be, I think, this notable thing that she can use this dark magic, that she basically can harness the power of this dark energy, dark life form, whatever it is, and do what she did, and that she got her memories back of her being Unnerva from Zarkon, establishing a difference in, I suppose, the way that both of them were possessed, and that Zarkon remembered everything about the past, but like the dark energy, I suppose they're trying to say, like enhanced and kind of amplified his kind of negative emotions to turn him into the tyrant that he eventually became, whereas Unnerva was basically fully taken over into like a different person, to the point where like Hagar, I suppose the entity Hagar is effectively meant to be, the living embodiment in a way of the dark energy, but I'm not entirely sure of that. There's probably something to be delved into there. They could also go down the road of just the fact that like why Unnerva was, I suppose, dying in a way was basically because of like quintessence affecting her mind. So like she may have just anyway during the end of her life as Unnerva been forgetting everything about what she's done up to now, and it was only what she was turned into, Hagar, getting all those memories back that she had lost, not because she died and was resurrected and was possessed, but mainly because she actually just, because of her research and the brain injury she was suffering from, actually, lost all those memories. That's another thing I suppose to go into, because like one of the other mysteries would be Lotor and the fact of like, okay, they say Zarkon is his father, but like, does that mean Hagar is his mother? They very specifically never say that, and I suppose just because like technically they did say both of them were dead, technically can they have children? Or like, is Lotor just made with like the DNA of Zarkon and Hagar or something like that? Or was he actually given birth to, or something like that? Like, they've presented these sort of questions just because of how like crazy basically the circumstances for Zarkon and Unnerva are, with both of them being, over 10,000 years old, and not because they were in like stasis sleep or anything like that. They've literally been like active for 10,000 years. So there's that question to answer. But the dark energy itself presents the idea of like, oh, so eventually we're going to get to the point where Voltron will probably fight this dark energy again. And I think that's very interesting, because it to some degree means that once maybe it's all figured out, Team Voltron in a way will be fighting to kind of, I suppose, save in a way Zarkon and Unnerva from who they've become, and in a way save who they were prior to being, possessed by all of this stuff. In that, I don't think you can take the full blame of everything that happened away from Zarkon himself and Unnerva and just put it all on the darkness, but definitely a lot of it, in that, like, I think that the implication of the backstory is that we are meant to take it that way, that the darkness is effectively what, meant that all of this stuff happened. In that, realistically, like when Zarkon was revived and found out about the destruction of his planet by Alfor, I think the original Zarkon would have eventually understood why Alfor had to do what he had to do, but amplified by the darkness, and also, I suppose, to some degree Zarkon would feel anger towards Alfor. He obviously is established to have not listened to the full context of why that needed to happen, but definitely very interesting. I hope they have a story for what the darkness is, and don't just leave it as this just random dark entity. I really want to know like what the origin of that, like, that alternate reality is, that was on Dibazol, and is there any significance to this dark energy outside of anything? Is there something more to it than it just being just a random evil thing that kind of is the ultimate evil in the show? I hope there is, and that's what I think makes season 4 and onwards very interesting, in that you now have this thing of like, everyone is suspicious of Shiro and everything that he does is going to be analyzed, but we also don't know what Lotor is doing going forward either, because he's acting very kind of different than a lot of the other villains that we've had up to now. Plus, there's obviously the potential for this, darkness to happen. We don't know how Hagar Unnerva is going to act now going forward, now that she has her memories back, in that how different will she be, and especially because Zarkon is back now. Does this mean we're now going to have basically a kind of Galra civil war within the Empire, of Lotor obviously opposing his father, us not knowing why Lotor was banished in the first place, and why he isn't around for like the first 2 seasons? Clearly there's some sort of an issue between him and his father, and why is that? And will it be even worse now that Zarkon is back and seems to be even further possessed by this darkness, that like, almost in a way it feels like Hagar was the main one possessed by the darkness, but now that's been shifted over to like Zarkon is now the main one possessed by the darkness, and he'll be like even more powerful and dangerous now. So like, that's going to be big going forward, and plus all those other stuff still to come, as I kind of talked about, like with whatever way they go about Allura's reveal and so on, it's going to be fascinating to see what they do. But I think that's more or less everything I wanted to talk about in this specific video. Of course, like as the season 4 stuff begins to come out a bit more, we can get into the speculation about everything still to come, because we know, of course, that realistically, it's probably about time to commit to the Paige Matt stuff and her finding him. That's been a plot point. They did address that slightly this season with the first episode, Paige kind of investigating it to a degree, but not massive detail. Just like, yep, we're aware it's still a plot point. We'll get back to it, but not right now. That's basically what they said to us. But yeah, there's that. And then, with regards to the backstory, I'm kind of wondering, like, they kind of sped through a lot of stuff at the end quite quickly. Will we ever go back and, I think, properly get what actually went down in some of those final moments? What did Alfor and Zarkon say to each other prior to Alfor's death? In that all they showed was just the final blow, basically, no actual dialogue between the two of them. I think that's probably a quite important scene. I don't know if maybe they have dialogue there, or they meant to establish that the Zarkon that killed Alfor there was just so basically under the influence of this darkness that he really didn't say anything. It was just a pure fight. They really didn't actually say anything. Or is it more of a thing where, as I said, it just kind of more amplifies his emotions and feelings, and we maybe did have a kind of bigger fight. It was a Sozen Roku moment where they really had this argument and so on. But I think that's where I'll end it for now. That's my thoughts on all of the kind of open plot points that we still have left. And obviously, as I said, like, we're not too far away from season 4, and I'll definitely do coverage of that on my channel. And I'll probably do another speculation video closer to season 4 once we know a little bit more about what it's about. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on what I discussed in this video today. That's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.